r/MaliciousCompliance, following the court order. Story 1. Over a decade ago, I came home to find I was being moved out by my wife. We weren't in a great place, but I was blindsided. I was also served with a protection order that stated I could not come home without prior written permission. I had to go through my wife to see the kids, etc., and it was in effect in 90 days. I was devastated. A relative connected me with a bulldog of a lawyer. This lady was brilliant and no nonsense. She filed a rebuttal to the protection order but told me these things take time, and we were unlikely to see a judge before the 90 days were up. She was very clear that I must follow the court order to the letter. If there was any evidence otherwise, I'd be in an uphill battle if and when my wife renewed it. It only took one day before my now ex needed me to take the kids. I had crashed at a friend's house, so I had no place to take them. So we agreed I'd watch them at home. I waited a few blocks away while waiting for an email. Ex called me and I reminded her of the details of the order and that I wouldn't come until I had permission. This happened twice more that I waited down the street within the first week, so I told her I wouldn't leave where I was staying until I had the email. It was about 20 minutes away. I texted her to remind her. The very next day, she again did an email. We were planning on picking up the kids to take them to school since their school was only a few minutes from my work. However, because I had not received written permission, I ran out of time to drive to pick up the kids and then make it to their school and work. She called, furious that I wasn't there. I reminded her about the permission and that I was out of time. She ended up being very late to work that day. She then wanted to give me blanket permission to come and go as needed, but my lawyer advised against it. Follow the order. The culmination of this was a few weeks later when she again forgot to send permission. Her boyfriend was staying over but didn't have his car with him. They both had to get to work, and that was the day I learned that he was her direct supervisor. Ex had to call a friend from work to pick up kids and take them to school, and the friend found out. Of course, it got out at their workplace. Within a week of that, the boyfriend was fired over their relationship and my ex was suspended. By this time, I had my own place, so the kids ended up staying with me most days. I later learned that the protection order was the boyfriend's idea. Ex was quite mad about it as it turned into evidence that I wasn't a threat to her or the family, and the judge was quite harsh with her over it when we settled for support in parenting time. She called it intentional and harmful parental alienation. Ever since then, I've kind of hated the boyfriend. I've always been polite and respectful with the boyfriend because he'd become my kid's stepdad, but I swore if ever I had the chance, I'd get back at him. I figured it would be something petty, but then he gift-wrapped my revenge and I've been running with it for almost 3 weeks now. My kids are mostly grown now, some in university, some in grades 11 through 12. The uni kids live with me while the high school ones still go back and forth with their mom. I'm also remarried now. My wife and I each have our own vehicles, but my wife owns and insures a minivan for when we all are going somewhere together. The kids are free to use it too, as only one has a car. We only have one set of keys, so I put an AirTag on it. It's a little transponder that tracks its location. I put it on there just in case the keys were lost. About 3 weeks ago, one of my older kids took the van out for the night but ended up staying at his mom's on the couch. Around 7 a.m. the next day, another kid asked to use the van. I pinged the AirTag only to find out it was hours away in an industrial section of another town. I was quite concerned about why my kid was out there. I called him up and he was at his mom's where he said he'd be. He had no idea the van was missing. I called the police and gave them the location of the van. Within 20 minutes, they had stopped the van and the driver said he had permission to use it. Lo and behold, it's my ex-wife's boyfriend. The police weren't very interested in detaining him as it would be easier for him to just drive the van back to our town and we could sort it out here. However, it wasn't my van nor was he listed on the insurance to drive it. I asked that it be impounded. In Canada, we can't press charges, but I was adamant that this was theft and that I wasn't going to let it go. Since the guy was out of town with no ride, the police did end up detaining him probably because it was easier. I was given info for the yard where the van was impounded. Since we had the next day off, my wife and I drove out to the yard to pick it up. When we got there, I first checked for damage since it was sitting a little low. Nothing outside. When I checked inside, I found out that it was loaded with industrial fasteners and cable. Think seismic mitigation. Turns out the boyfriend used my wife's van to pick up stuff for work. My wife turns on her heels and walks to the office. I had to jog to keep up. She asks who has access to the van. They have the only set of keys, so my wife is assured only her or me. At this point, I get where she's going with this. I instructed them that no one accessed the van but us. I had $35 with me, so I gave it to them as a tip. They promised me that no one would get in there, and they actually moved the van into a secured area within the yard. Then we went home without the van. We weren't even home from the long drive when I got the first text from the boyfriend about getting the equipment. I explained that we left the van as there were expenses we were not going to pay: towing, impounding fees, daily storage. I told him that he'd have to pay for them before I picked up the van. He was super mad and swore he'd pay me back. I said no way. Within an hour, I got a call from his boss. They need the equipment ASAP for a time-sensitive job. I explained that it was impounded and that I wouldn't have time to get it until next week, and it has to be paid in advance. Boss swears up and down at me. I calmly explained that I didn't steal a vehicle to transport his stuff. Boss was having none of that, so I said I wouldn't tolerate that and hung up. Then I blocked him and his company on every platform I'm reachable on, and that was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've been able to make excuses every single time the boyfriend tries to arrange to pick up the van. Often because the kids don't have the van, I have to drive them. Boss has gotten through a few times using other numbers and sent a ton of emails that I ignored. But I did reply and explain that both my wife and I need about 4 hours to do the round trip and that it needs to be paid for ahead of time. And it's added up. $25 a day for secure storage, plus towing and impound fees, etc. Plus, I wanted to be paid for the fuel the boyfriend used as well as our travel. The boyfriend and I agreed on the standard 58 cents per kilometer, and so the boss e-transferred us for the total cost of our driving. By now, the van has made one trip and our car has done two. It came to almost $600. So last Friday, it finally happened. My wife and I drove out and picked up the van. It was prepared and ready to be released. I dropped off a dozen beers at the office when I picked up the keys and went to grab the van. However, I wasn't going to transport the boss and the boyfriend's stuff, so I arranged for it to be held at the yard at the same rate as a vehicle, unloaded it, and left right before it closed for the weekend. I got a call from the boyfriend asking when he could come by with a work truck to get the stuff. I told him it's still at the impound almost 2 hours away and the office opens Monday at 9 o'clock. There was only silence on the other end, so I hung up after about 10 seconds. Through this, I've been getting vague updates from my ex, who I've got a good relationship with now. She was livid with her boyfriend and was clear with me that any and all consequences were squarely on him. He's kept his job but is missing the next pay increase and is not getting his year-end bonus. Ex said they're way too short-staffed to let him go, but he's in the doghouse at home and at work. No word on criminal charges for taking the van, but the Crown handles that and I'm not suing in civil court. This story has everything: theft, property rights, and a dash of legal maneuvering that would make any lawyer's eyebrows raise. So let's break it down, shall we? First up, we've got the theft of the van. Okay, this may seem like your run-of-the-mill case of borrowing without asking kind of situation, but essentially still wrong. It's like swiping your neighbor's lawnmower while they're not watching. Sure, familiarity might breed friendship, but it sure doesn't absolve you of the need to politely ask, right? It's a clear-cut case where permission was lacking, making it an act of theft by any legal definition. Even if you're on a first-name basis with the owner, borrowing their stuff without the green light remains a no-no. This whole escapade underscores a fundamental principle of property rights and the rule of law. Permission and consent matter regardless of personal relationships. Now, let's switch gears a bit. Remember the ex-husband? Yeah, the one who, over a decade ago, found himself locked out of his own home thanks to a court order orchestrated by the boyfriend. Talk about a blast from the past. Fast forward to the present, and this ex-husband's got a plan up his sleeve to make the boyfriend pay. And I'm not talking about emotional payback here. His master stroke, withholding the van until expenses were covered. It's like a legal chess move where everyone's trying to outsmart each other without breaking too many rules. That ex-husband, once the underdog, has found a way to flex his legal muscles in a way that's both cunning and, well, kind of petty. This twist in this story highlights the intricacies of human behavior and the legal system's knack for handling these sticky situations. In a way, it's like a taste of that sweet, sweet revenge with the ex-husband playing the game within the boundaries of the law. It's a reminder that actions can have consequences, and sometimes people cook up clever ways to assert their rights or seek a bit of payback without going full-on rogue. In the end, this whole story is a wild ride through the quirky and intriguing realm of human interactions where legal lines might bend but not break. It shows that even in situations as tangled as this one, the law can still find its way to sort out the mess and dish out justice, albeit with a funky, unexpected twist. So here's a reminder that when it comes to matters of legality and ethics, there's often more than meets the eye. And while revenge might be a dish best served cold, sometimes it's served with a side of legality, adding a dash of intrigue and a sprinkle of absurdity to the mix.
What was the worst time you walked in? Rufus Rugs, open up! Sorry for barging in like that, but I just had to share the sponsor of today's video. Me and the boys from Rufus Rugs. Now you might be saying to yourself,
excuse me, what the actual are you doing in my house?
But I can assure you're gonna like this. We've been hard at work creating the best quality and premium hand-tufted rugs money can buy. Now imagine this. You, chilling on your bed, watching a Rufus Stories video, and staring at a rug that's not just a rug. Nope, it's a masterpiece. It's the kind of rug that makes your friends wish they were you. But they're not. And the best part is that these aren't your average cheap quality rugs. Nope, each one is handcrafted by me and the boys. No shortcuts, no robot assembly lines, and no dropshipping BS. Just pure rug grind. Whether you love anime, sports, cars, or anything else you can think of, we can turn it into a rug. So click the first link in the description and have your custom idea come to life.
Story 2. I've worked in warehouses for years. A few years back, I was a contractor. Companies would hire us and bring in 20 people for a few weeks when they desperately needed help. I was a shift lead, usually the highest person on site. I needed to talk to my boss regularly throughout the day on a company phone. One warehouse had a policy where only managers could have their phones on the floor, and technically, I wasn't a manager. Everyone under me was instructed to leave them in their car or locker, however I needed mine. One day, I was on the phone with my boss, and one of the managers for the company we were working with saw me and demanded that I hand him my phone. I refused. He then threatened to kick me out, so I rounded up all of my workers and said we were taking a break. We all went outside, and I told my boss about what happened. He came to the site right away and started talking to their boss. He told him that I needed my phone on the floor, but since I wasn't a manager, they refused. So my boss decided that if I couldn't do my job, then none of my subordinates could do theirs either. At the end of the day, the other company was pissed off that we didn't get any work done and decided to cancel our contract. This has cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars because it was written in the contract that they will have to pay us to send us home before the original end date. We all still got paid and got 2 weeks off before having to go somewhere else. Now, this story actually made me question the importance of always sticking to the rulebook. In this story, a contractor who was just doing his job was stuck in the middle of a hard-nosed policy enforcer in a stuffy warehouse. It's like a sitcom waiting to happen, and it makes you wonder if some people have forgotten how to use their common sense. So in this warehouse that has a rule for everything, from how many coffee breaks you can take to how you should breathe while on the premises. Okay, maybe not the breathing part, but you get the idea. Then enter our contractor working for a company that relies on him for updates around the clock. Because he's a responsible guy, he's always ready to answer the call even when he's in the warehouse. But here's the twist, no phones allowed on the floor. Okay, I get it. Warehouses are noisy, bustling places where safety is of utmost importance. But come on, this is the 21st century. We've got more technology in our phones than we sent to the moon in '69. Also, the contractor's company has their own set of rules too, and one of them is stay connected or else. So he's caught between a rock and a hard place. He needs to answer his phone, but Mr. Warehouse Enforcer is looking around like a hawk on the prowl. Despite the contractor's explanations about his situation to Mr. Warehouse Enforcer, he just wouldn't budge and pointed out their own policies like it's gospel. And here I am thinking, dude, lighten up. It's like he's forgotten that sometimes bending the rules a little makes more sense than following them to the letter. I mean, let's be real, in this age of instant communication and global business, being unreachable for hours on end can be disastrous. The contractor's company needed updates and they needed them pronto. It's not like the contractor had any evil schemes up his sleeves, right? Relaying the floor plan to a bunch of hooligans for a night of marauding? Of course not, but nope, Mr. Warehouse Enforcer's stuck in his rulebook-induced trance. Now, I'm all for rules. They keep society running smoothly, prevent chaos. But when the rules start getting in the way of common sense and good judgment, it's time to rethink things. The warehouse should have recognized the contractor's situation and allowed him a little leeway. It's not like he was breaking any laws or endangering anyone. He was just trying to do his job, which, by the way, benefits the warehouse as well. In the end, what happened? The poor contractor, who was primarily hired by his company to do his job, did exactly as he was expected to do, reporting to his superiors. This led to a series of events that justified his role as a leader and his actions, and a sizable financial loss for the warehouse from breach of contract and the delay of work. That was a bigger loss for the warehouse if you ask me. So, you see, sometimes we need to remember that rules are there to serve us, not the other way around. Common sense should always have a seat at the table, and bending a rule here and there, when it makes sense, can lead to smoother operations and happier employees. In this case, the warehouse should have respected the contractor's company rules and given a little nod to practicality. In life, balance is key. Stick to the important rules, but don't forget that sometimes a little bending can make all the difference. And if you ever find yourself in a situation like our contractor, just remember, it's not always about the rules, it's about what makes sense. Story 3. So I'm working for a low-level corporation, about 450 employees. I've been there for 5 years and have risen to the top of my department's productivity levels. I mention this as it does pertain to the story. Management had a policy that latecomers would be penalized, but that lateness could be excused under some circumstances. I was good at my job, and I actually loved doing it, so I was more or less a dream employee. I always showed up to work 20 to 30 minutes early because I like to sit in the lunchroom and prepare for my day. Management knew I was almost always early, so if I was late from time to time, and such instances were rare, they'd let it slide as there was always a valid reason. Now, for some other employees, this latitude wasn't applied. Chronically late employees would get written up and not have their constant lateness excused. They'd complain, of course, but management was firm. They ran an actual meritocracy where more productive employees would experience preferential treatment. Then the business gets sold and we get new management, an international corp only interested in buying us up, stripping us down, and selling off the company. Of course, they denied this constantly, but the fact that over the next 2 years they stripped us down and sold off the company proved they were lying. New management comes in and has to make a bunch of idiotic changes. One of those changes is that no reasons for being late are accepted regardless of validity. Anyone 5+ minutes late for work would be written up, so at the team meeting where this is explained, I asked, so if someone is 5 minutes late and someone else is 3 hours late, the punishment is the same? And they said yes. From that day on, I stopped coming in early. I'd still head to work at my usual time, but I sat in a local coffee shop instead of my work's lunchroom. This meant that my work missed out because in the past I would often help out by answering questions, even start work early if needed, because I loved my job and the old management were wonderful bosses. No more of that under new management. In fact, if something happened, like unexpectedly bad traffic and I was going to end up being a few minutes late, I'd just say, oh well. If being 3 hours late is the same punishment as 5 minutes late, I'd just decide to come in later. I'd call work to tell them I was delayed, then go out and have a leisurely meal in a restaurant or run some personal errands, go shopping, even see a movie, etc. Depending on my mood and how useless the new management had been lately, what would have been, say, a 7-minute lateness on my part would end up seeing me roll in 3 hours late. Sure, it cost me a few bucks, but I made almost as much in bonuses than I did in hourly salary, so missing out on a few hours here and there didn't bother me too much. I'd come in 3 or 4 hours late and my new bosses would be fuming. Nothing they could do, though, but write me up for the basic tardy, same as they would have if I was just 5 minutes late. Now, this story reminds me of a real-life sitcom episode that you can't help but chuckle at, and I'm talking about corporate shenanigans, rule bending, and a dash of clever defiance that'll make you raise an eyebrow and say, well played. First off, let's talk about those management policies. It's a classic case of rules being rules, but then again, there's also a bit of room for interpretation. Latecomers, they're the bane of any workplace, right? But this company had this neat little policy, a sort of get-out-of-jail-free card for the occasional slip-up. Seems fair enough. Well, for her, it was a golden ticket. She was a rock star employee, the one who showed up early, rocked at their job, and generally made the workplace a better place. So when they stumbled in late, which was as rare as a unicorn sighting, management gave them a pass because they knew this person wasn't just snoozing in bed. But here's when things get a little spicy. New management rolls in and it's like they've got a rule book made of stone tablets. No excuses, no exceptions. If you're late, you're in trouble, even if you were held up by an epic traffic jam or an alien invasion. It's like they went from a chill workplace to the punctuality police. So what's her response to this no-nonsense regime? She decided to play the game, but with a twist. Instead of sauntering into the office like she used to, she chose a different battleground, the local coffee shop. Now the workplace missed out big time because our champ was the go-to guru, always ready to help out and get the ball rolling. But with the new management, it was no more Mr. Nice Guy. If she were going to be a few minutes late, no sweat. Heck, why not turn it into an extended break? It's like they said, if the punishment for being 3 hours late is the same as 5 minutes late, why rush? So it was all about making a statement for her. You mess with the rules, I'll find creative ways to follow them to a T. It's quite funny to imagine the scene as she sauntered into the office, hours behind schedule, and their new bosses. They were fuming, but there wasn't much they could do except hand out the standard tardy write-up. It's like a game of chess where our champion was a few moves ahead. So you see, sometimes when you're faced with a rigid system, you gotta use a bit of cunning and creativity to make your point. In the right hands, a little rule bending can turn into a masterclass of navigating the corporate maze. It's a story of defiance, strategy, and a sprinkle of workplace rebellion that'll leave you with a grin and a nod to the art of playing by the rules with a twist. So if you enjoy these stories, you won't want to miss r/MaliciousCompliance, be fired, or take a big pay cut. Watch me walk out the door. Story 2 was pretty satisfying. I'll see you there.